We're live with Joy Pullman. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Well, I mean, so I tweeted out about this, I don't know, last night, and I tagged you in the tweet, I don't know, and that sort of thing, and I'm like, you've got the nifty blue check on there. I was like, oh. So we've got our first blue check Twitter.
That's how they tell you that they own part of your soul.
Is that what it is?
I actually didn't have anything to do with that. It just randomly appeared one day. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure Federalist wants you blue checked, I would guess, because that way, you know, because if I created a Joy Pullman account and started saying all kinds of crazy stuff, I mean, that's the problem with Twitter is that platform is so out of control. It's ridiculous.
Did I just hear that the other day that they're making some changes? They're maybe changing whether you can see or how you can see how many people have retweeted and commented on a certain post.
Yeah.
And then anyway, I wasn't sure about the details about that, but apparently some changes are forthcoming.
Yeah, hopefully so. I saw Jack Dorsey and one of his little lieutenants on Joe Rogan's show, and there was this bulldog, I mean, kind of libertarian leftist type of, you know, barefoot on the beach type of journalist. I think he writes for Vox. Shoot, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Anyway, he was just hammering Dorsey with these questions about how they are treating those on, I mean, like their whole policy with, you know, misgendering and that sort of thing. You know, how all of those policies lean left, and you know, it's obvious that you guys have a bias toward this in your terms of service.
I actually wonder how their algorithms work, because if they're user-based, I mean, so if it's more automatic, kind of like some of Google's, if their user-based tends to be left, then it's kind of learning from the people that are there, and so that would be like an automatic biasing as opposed to an actual. I mean, I'm sure that the editorial content people at Twitter are also very left, but you know, that could be another factor that doesn't require specific human, you know, evil, nefarious going in and changing this, if it's just kind of like a learning algorithm. Anyway, but I don't know a lot about the details.
Yeah.
I don't frankly care. I don't spend a lot of time on there. It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
It's a huge time suck.
Well, right. I mean, yeah, for sure. Because I mean, and that's the thing is when I first started doing podcasts and stuff like that, did the Facebook thing, and I would get, you know, I'd post these provocative things, and then there was this big to do, and it would just consume your whole week sometimes.
Yeah.
About
who cares?
Right, and who
What's
cares?
the
Right,
point?
and yeah, who are you convincing, that sort of thing? So I've definitely cooled off to
I'd rather spend that time reading my kids' picture books.
Right.
Like honestly, straight up.
yeah, for sure. But it sounded like what Dorsey made it sound like was that, and his assistant there or whatever, they, with some of these cases like Alex Jones and some of this other stuff that's gone on, they actually go in and look at the, you know, they don't have algorithms that automatically kick you out. You get reported, and then they've got a staff.
I think there's both of that going on.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like there was, I forget what it was, but there was some algorithm like learn to blank, you know, that was kicking people off, like as in learn to code. And that wasn't a human being, you know, waiting until someone typed it and then canceling their account. It was just, you know, some automatic flag.
Right.
So I'm sure both are occurring.
Right. Well, and that's, yeah. So anyway, I was like, oh, so I checked that out. I looked it up. I was kind of like jealous a little bit. And so, so I looked at like how to get blue checked. And so I went on their thing, and there's like, oh yeah, go here if you want to get a blue check, if you want your account verified. And I thought, oh, that might not be a bad idea, because who knows? Mm-hmm. And so I went on there and like, we are not accepting any more applications for verified accounts. I was like, darn it. Not that I necessarily needed this one, but it's something to think about. I mean, as you start to get out there, who knows what crazies come out of the woodwork.
There are many crazies.
Yeah. Who might,
I stopped believing a lot of things. I think a lot of people treat everything they see with a hefty grain of salt, if not like a whole salt chunk. Have you ever seen those salt blocks that animals lick in their pastures?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There ought to be one of those next to everybody's computer screen.
Yeah, for sure.
I know. I mean, honestly, sometimes when I'm just reading the news, you know, I just think, I don't know. Yeah, right. This is preposterous. I can't wait for the debunking of this, which, very often follows. So.
Yeah. Well, so what? Yeah. What about that? That's what seems very. I don't recall the climate ever being the way it kind of is, where it seems like everybody's got this, there's an agenda, there's a narrative to drive at all costs.
Well, I'm not very old, so I don't remember how things used to be.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah. So for everybody, anybody who wants to know, I'm old and Joy is young.
Well,
and,
I mean, as far as I understand, the media has been biased all the way, at least, all the way back to the 1950s, right? When there's the big three on, well, there's not television in the 1950s, but 50s, 60s, and on, the ABC, CBS, the bias was going on. It was just not as clear. Anyway. So we're certainly more aware of it nowadays, but it's really hard for me to tease out, if how much of that is just growing public understanding of what has always been there, versus if you go back to like the yellow journalism of the 1920s, right? Anyway, there have always been newspapers reporting garbage in an effort to whip people up. So, anyway, that goes all the way back to like the 1600s when, newspapers used to be kind of like mouth organs of the king or the parliament or whatever, was the governing body. So media bias is maybe, is a really old thing as far as I can tell.
Yeah, maybe I'm just a little more sensitive to it at this point. It seems like it's at another level, but
sometimes you feel a little bit like you live not in a. We don't live in a totalitarian society, but there's an edge, of where you can't just. America is a very trusting society, or we have been historically. That's been noted by commentators all the way back. Of open, honesty, friendly, people that characterize as Americans. But I think we're getting more suspicious, and there's definitely more infection of the discourse. You can even see that with things like, Russian bots. Sometimes when I see a comment or when I see, a certain user just behaving really weirdly on Twitter, I think, how do I really know that's Tea Party patriot or like crazy lefty socialist commie 1, 2, 3, 4? How do I know it's not, some bot somewhere just trying to get me mad?
Right. Right.
And really, it could be on either side. We don't,
Right. Well, that's what's kind of strange when I'm out and about, as I am. I bring this stuff up with people, and it's mostly truck drivers and steelers and millers and these sorts blue collar guys, and you find them on both sides of the political fence, but the thing of it is, what I'm wondering is, the media portrays us as this massively divided country, and I think there's some truth to that. But when you're kind of out there and with everybody else, I haven't seen anybody at each other's throats. We're not, punching each other out.
I think the media is something that like the politicians pay a lot more attention to than normal people do, which is a really problematic break when the politicians are supposed to reflect the people, not, frankly, really out of touch media class. So a lot of times that the conversation that's happening there is completely disjointed from reality. And again, with a government that's supposed to be representative of the people, that is a big problem.
Right. So did you see this? I'm not sure who did it. It was some sort of map where you could see like the hot spots where there was a certain political alignment.
Oh, I
and
heard
then
about
how
that.
yeah. And so the the Acela corridor
Yeah.
is like this political alignment, and it's like this bubble echo chamber.
Is it how unipolar they are? And I've heard wasn't there a recent map that came out that showed basically the neighborhoods in which people lived more around people just like them and all these different aspects. Is that what you're talking about?
Right.
Versus ones that had a lot more interplay between people of different ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the idea being that if I'm living in Boston, Greenwich Village, New York, these sorts of things, I'm not going to hear any opposing ideas ever. And you're going to think anybody that would, possibly say support Trump.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's insane. Nobody supports Trump that I know. I've never met a person that supports Trump. And so, how much of that do you think is kind of driving this idea that we're almost, I've heard people on both sides talk about how we're almost at a place where we're going to grab muskets and we're going to go to civil war. And I'm going,
have you ever met my neighbors?
Right. Are
any of us going to fight each other even with our fists? No.
So, yeah. So that
also, can you imagine like Pajama Boy getting out a musket? He doesn't even.
Right.
He'd probably be like pointing it backwards, you know?
Right.
Or oh no, it's gonna attack me! It's scary and black.
Right.
Must be an assault rifle. Okay, you know that's never happening. Or if it does, anyway.
Right.
Easy victory.
Yeah. I would think so. Well, and that's the thing that these politicians that talk about instituting some of the gun regulations that they're talking about, instituting, I'm kind of like, you all really don't want to do that unless you want some serious trouble on your hands, because there are, several million people in Texas that if you do that, I'm afraid how they might react. And so that's what's scary about the divide that's being portrayed, is that if somebody acts in a certain way and there's this divide being portrayed, then the reaction might be more, might be over.
Right, because they're not actually responding to reality. They're responding to a constructed reality. So then, it's kind of like they're wearing goggles that make them see things that aren't there, which is obviously really a problem, especially when they have a lot of power.
Yeah. So I'd like to think you've used the education guru, all things education. You even wrote a book. What was that like? I'm thinking about writing a book. Is that, how did that go?
It was painful. I'm really glad that I did it, and I had a really great editor, which I always appreciate editing, because I do a lot of it for other people and I get very little of it for myself. And so it's great to grow. It was great to grow as a writer through that process. But it was a huge amount of work. And basically I really wanted to, I put a lot of work into my research on Common Core, so I really wanted to turn that into a book to kind of have something to tie it with a bow and say, I did that, all that work led to something big. And so I'm really proud of having done that, but it was a lot of work. It was a huge amount of work, and it was a huge amount of work on top of a full-time job and having kids, and so I don't plan to do that again if I can help it.
How long did it take to write the book?
Well, I did all of the research. I received a fellowship to do the research for what became the book, and that was a year-long fellowship. But I had already, before winning that, I had been working on it for at least a year and possibly two. This is now ancient history to me.
Yeah.
But I would say 3 or 4 years basically went into writing. And then from the book, proposal to having it published was probably almost a year. Yeah, so 3 or 4 years was the whole thing. So it was kind of a big deal.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's one of my, I guess, throwaway goals. I've got these life goals that if I accomplish them, yay. If not, I'd like to publish a book at some point. So I'm just curious.
If I did it again, I think I would play with, even despite the great editing, I've been playing with the idea of just self-publishing on Amazon, just because even though it wouldn't be just for lighter fare, or things where you take a couple of essays and repackage them into a book. So not the Common Core book that I wrote had more than 400 footnotes, and I interviewed dozens and dozens of people. It was a really big, exhaustive, intellectually demanding task. But I think there's different kinds of writing, and I like to write really in depth and have lots of proof for what I'm saying. But there could be other books that didn't require that kind of work, that would be quicker, start to finish process. So
yeah, that's what I'm curious about. Is it seems like, well, I don't know. I'd like to see you get some more of your opinion stuff out there in book form, maybe on a single subject, and just just kind of.
One of our writers has suggested that to me.
Right, yeah.
I told him, to give up my sleep to do this? What are you pitching here?
Right. Again, well, and that's the thing is, I'm kind of starting to, I've got an outline, and I'm just starting to, and I thought, you know what, I can comb over line by line like I do with Federalist articles, which that's what I do. I'm just super so when I send it to you, you're just not like, oh gosh, I can't do anything with this, can't go away.
That's appreciated.
But I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna try to crank out a book, I'm gonna crank it out, and then we can go back and so yeah, so I'm interested to hear what kind of people, how people approach this, and I've got to believe that these people that are cranking out 2 and 3 books a year aren't doing the kind of research you're talking about.
I mean, I don't know anyone who is a serious person who can crank out 2 to 3 books a year. Maybe if you're writing a novel, I could see that.
Okay.
But for like a public policy book, that would be.
Yeah, I think.
I could see doing it like at the later stage of your career when you've already amassed, the knowledge base, and then you have a research assistant who just goes in and footnotes, your writing.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. And then there's a lot of established intellectuals who they have collections of their essays put together. Obviously, that's easy. They've already done most of the work. They just need to compile and edit it. Anyway,
right.
But I don't. Anyway, it's a big job. But having done it, I don't think it would take as long. And I've learned a lot more about the book structure and all of that through the process. So that also really helped.
Right. Well, and it seems like it's fairly well received.
The people who read it recommend it, which is kind of them. It's hard for me as an author, right? Because you wonder if people think it's garbage, they don't want to tell you. If they're your friends.
Right.
If they hate you, they'll be happy to tell you,
Yeah.
And I did have a little bit of, people who disagree with me politically bashing the book and giving it, bad reviews on Amazon, which I think it happens, but it's a little unfair.
Yeah.
But, I don't, that's whatever, it happens. I don't really. Yeah. But so it's hard for me to judge the value of the book itself because I'm the person who wrote it.
Right.
Like asking me to judge the value of my child. My kids are way more important than books. But,
well, sure, but still, yeah.
Isn't your kid beautiful? Of course he's beautiful, even if he's kind of got a lumpy head. I think he's beautiful.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, and so as far as reading comments, I think I've read a total of 1 comment on anything I've ever published. And I'm like,
probably
okay, I'm done.
I used to do that, but anyway, after a while, you just think, why it's like Twitter. Why am I spending the time? There's crazy people on there, people saying vile things.
Right.
Why bother?
Well, and I'm astonished at I'll just say this for myself. I'm astonished at myself that somebody I've gotten into, a knockdown, drag out fight with on Facebook, if I will pursue the opportunity to talk to that person one-on-one, maybe even private chat, or Skype or Hangout, my attitude completely changes.
Yeah.
And that's one reason why I've just really backed off of social media in a lot of ways altogether. Now sometimes I'll get into some tiffs every once and again, for sure, but I've really backed off. And if I do interact, I'm just kid gloves, super careful, because I'm trying to discipline myself to say, what would I do if this person was sitting in front of me? Yeah. That's a difficult thing, I think, for anybody to do when you're in those situations. And that's what I worry about, where, whatever the issue, whether it be education or immigration or, race issue, anything, we have chosen to kind of do these battles on Twitter and on, through books or whatever else. And not that the books are bad, but it's kind of like nobody wants to talk to each other. Nobody wants to get face to face anymore and say, let's hammer this stuff out. I don't know. I think
we've really lost. Maybe not lost or maybe never had it, but I feel myself that I am trying to learn how to have conversations. And also learn how to actually express because I've had lots of conversations where I don't say what I really think because I have very different views from the person I'm talking to, or a lot. I'm a very, I don't know. I have very strong moral opinions, and basically everything that everybody does, contradicts what I think they should be doing.
Right.
So and then you think about, okay, so I love this person. How could I possibly convey my really strong feelings all the way over here when they're over here, and persuade? Like, it's really hard to do that. So I've been trying to learn how to do that, and when actually talking to people, it is really, really hard. But I also think the advantage of being in person is obviously you can express care in nonverbal ways, and you can pause and listen to them. You can touch them. There's things that you can do in person that you can't do online that really help cushion the blow. But you can also you can listen to them to kind of. There's so much about inflection and tone and things, to really hear what, the feelings behind the words, I think gives compassion, even if you ultimately still disagree with them. So, all of that, I think in-person conversation is, I was about to say at the beginning it's a lost art, but maybe it's an art that we just don't know how to do. And the less that we do of it, the worse that, that we'll never improve if we don't practice. So, I mean, in personal life, I've been trying to practice, and I'm pretty rusty, I'm not as good at it as I'd like to be, but it feels good to try. And sometimes I try things and I say something, where a family, I offended someone I love, or I don't say something and I wish I had, so I don't know. None of us is going to get it perfect, but I think, again, you can't really improve if you're not trying.
Right. Well, and that's the thing that I found interesting is, I've made a lot of contacts through social media because I've decided, okay, I'm going to get into an argument with this atheist about whether God exists, right? Mm-hmm. And we have and he's possibly, he's calling me, you believe in unicorns and fanny slavery. I don't buy you, blah, blah, blah. So all these ad hominem attacks, it's fine. And I'm like, hey, let's get on Skype.
Oh.
And, I'm not, it's not a threatening thing. I'm trying to threaten you, but let's just actually talk about it and not treat each other like, we're just some sort of digital avatars. And what I found interesting, and this even goes with, some of my, I guess, close contacts with, the racial issue and that sort of thing is, hey, let's get together and talk. And they're like, I'm done talking. And that's, I'm starting to meet that again and again and again. I just, I'm done talking with you people. We can't go forward with you. What we have to do is, and I see this on both sides. It's almost like we're in this situation. And I think a lot of this is driven by, this is Sulla Corridor media that says, oh, we're this big divided country. Where we say, I just can't talk to you because we just have nothing to say to each other anymore. And
I think we do have some deep divisions. It's not that we're not divided, but I think the animus in the division isn't there at the same way that it is portrayed in the media. Americans obviously have some very deep rifts. If you just take, for example, one thing like the abortion issue, very clear and deep and long-term, disagreements with people on a very hot button, issue. And it's not that Americans, don't have opinions about that. It's not that if we just, talk to each other more, we're going to solve it necessarily. I think there's a clarification that's happening in our culture, where we have gotten to, closer endpoints of the opposing kind of ideologies that are in America. And so those are just kind of easier to see, because they've grown more, more true to themselves. So people on both sides, where they start with, the baseline propositions and maybe 100 years ago that got them here, so, you can talk to each other across this divide. Well, we followed, those ideas to their logical consequences, now over generations down, we're over here. Like maybe you can shout across that divide, so I don't think that it's not the case that it's not there, although, there's a lot of Americans in the middle still too, and there probably always will be. There were an American Revolution, and, I don't use that to be, it's a revolution. I'm just saying, of something that serious in American life, a third of people were in the middle, right? Yeah. So we have, I think, less serious challenges going on, and there's a lot of people in the middle, so that's always going to be the case. Anyway, so my point in saying that was not to say that no, we don't have divisions, but I think there still is room for talking among normal people, like people in your neighborhood and your family. Among like the leader types, the people who are constantly engaging ideas, I think there's less of that because they've done a lot of that, the work that the normal person hasn't, to say what do I really believe, and then follow their ideas to its conclusion, and then interact with the other side kind of on a more purist level than most normal people, I think, have done.
Right. Well, and I think that's kind of the discernment we need to make. Is I think there are some issues where we say, okay, this isn't a topic for discussion between you and I. This is a topic I'm going to defeat you on, abortion being one of them. Mm-hmm. I think to say that we have to beat you into submission on this somehow.
Right. And that's part of the problem, is that we have to live together, and if we have to live together, the wild swings in power between, say, I don't actually think the two major political parties are that far apart, but say, if you have a situation where Democrats come into power and it's like literally infanticide, and then Republicans come into power and they would never do this, but say, if they were the caricature that they're made out to be, then they say, no abortions, ever after, 12 weeks or whatever. Actually, more Americans would be more on board with the latter view, but that's a digression. But the point being, if that situation switched every 4 years when a new presidential administration came to power, we could not live in a country like that.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, what really makes people unsettled, because when the other side has power and they do things that you think are deeply immoral and dangerous, then it is kind of an existential crisis when they have the power to impose an ideology that you find repellent on you.
Right. Well, and I think about this all the time. I'm like, okay, I believe that abortion, I believe life begins at conception, and that abortion is murder.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think about how many children have been murdered in this country since Roe v. Wade,
and before there,
of course. And then
right, that was the floodgates. Yeah.
Right, and then compare that to the Holocaust.
Yeah.
We got them beat hands down.
Yeah.
And so you're sitting here thinking, oh, okay.
Right.
There's a problem.
We're sitting here virtue signaling about how we would have been the people to stand. We are not the people to stand up against the Nazis, because we're not doing that right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely right.
And it also makes historical things like slavery way more complex if you compare the two, because you think, okay, to people like us who believe life begins at conception, if you think genocide is happening right now, why are you not literally fighting over it? Well, there's lots of good reasons for that, but then if you say, okay, it makes it more complex to then look at things like the Holocaust, at slavery, and say, why didn't you just stop slavery? Well, there's millions of people in a racist society who have been ripped from their homelands, and who have been kept from being educated. It's a big problem. You can't just be like, oh, just fix the problem. Just,
Right.
go to war over abortion.
Right.
There's other stuff going on.
Right.
So anyway, I mean, that evil is really, really harder to beat than, a lot of us armchair philosophers like to think it is.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I don't know if you've read Tom Sowell's, I think it's called Black Rednecks.
Yes, I actually just read that a couple of months ago. What is the title of that?
Black,
it's White Liberals and Black Rednecks, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I just finished that. It was really good.
Really fascinating.
Yeah.
The part that really caught my attention was when he talked about how, so that the Haitian overthrow of slavery was this.
Yes.
It just
Yes.
and to this day,
it was a mass murderous revolt. And again, they had legitimate grievances.
Right.
Mass murder. Well, you could see how slave owners would be scared of that and react in really evil ways. That's how humans are. We're evil and we don't respond well to threats. Anyway, you could say, "Oh, you should have been restrained and judicious," but that's way too high an expectation of people, I think.
Right. Well, and I don't think Sowell goes this far, but the Civil War itself. I mean, look how England handled slavery. Mm-hmm. It's they phased it out.
Yeah. And the American founders were hoping that. And it was actually on the way to doing that in America. Things were going in a good direction there, and then we had technological advances as well as a number of economic measures, that the North and the South were fighting over in Congress, and that were really pushing the South economically into becoming a retrenched slave state instead of it fading out as it had been.
Right. Well, I'm okay. So I'm not sure. I agree with you, because what I would have, and this is the way I took Sowell, and he didn't go too deep into that, but I think the North was so outperforming the South economically and technologically that the South would have no longer been able to afford to hang on to slavery. Is that? Are you?
I don't know enough about it to be able to say that.
Okay. Right.
To the causes of the Civil War have, filled like encyclopedia length books that I have not read. So
Right.
I only know some basic stuff here,
Yeah. Well, and that's the one thing that just makes me, the red flags go up when I hear those who say, this country is founded on slavery, has benefited from slavery. And when you actually look into it, no, slavery actually held the country back.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, not just in the sense that it was, it was obviously a moral evil, and that had we figured out a way to make these slaves full citizens and have them contribute to our economy and these sorts of things, it would have been a much better place. But just by virtue of the fact that when you don't have slaves, you still have to figure out a way to get the cotton picked or the corn harvested and that sort of thing. And that's where technology and innovation and all these sorts of things come about. And had slavery not gone by the wayside, the Industrial Revolution never would have happened. The progress that the West has seen. Slavery held that back.
I think it was partly the industrial. I mean, if I understand it correctly, which I may not, the Industrial Revolution helped make slavery obsolete.
Right.
Because I mean, the world we live in fabulous wealth. I was just talking to my kids at dinner about this because my husband's reading this book about people living during the Irish potato famine. And he was telling the kids about, I mean, this is less than 100 years ago. This is during World War II. In their home, they had a community, not in their home, but next to their home, they had a community toilet. So all their neighbors all went to the same, basically outhouse, and it was right next to this family's house. And in the winter, when it rains all the time in Ireland, well, the feces in the animal stable was cleaned out right through their kitchen. So they just lived upstairs during the winter. But the point being, 75 years ago, people lived with like poop running underneath their kitchen. And this is how people lived. And that was how it was for centuries. So, it's easy for us to sit here and say, well, just fix it. Well, there's money. We have money coming out of our ears. That's not what human history has been like. Human history has been miserable, poverty-stricken, anyway, a history of people hurting people all the time. And really, I think how that applies to America is like America is one of the places where that constant historical truth has been not true. In America, slavery is the norm in human history. The amazing thing is that a country would fight itself to end slavery. The very concept of doing that would have made no sense to the Greeks, the ancient Greeks. The very concept of doing that would have made sense to nobody before essentially the Enlightenment, right? It was just, well, sucks to be you. You're one of the people who, were born to be a slave. Right. That's how they thought.
Yeah.
So anyway, so if you start from the default of suckage.
Yeah. Right.
Then then you can see kind of what rises above that. But we're lucky that we live in the fruit of that. So our default isn't suckage. So we really can't see with a proper historical lens.
Right. Well, exactly, and yeah, I don't know. I'm leaning toward the notion that we're so bored. We've got it so good that we just can't find anything to fight about, so we make stuff up.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Have you ever read any of Theodore Dalrymple? That's a pen name of a now retired British doctor who worked, I think, in a public hospital, particularly for the underclass. Okay. And so I think he's a psychiatrist, psychologist, mental health doctor, but he's also a medical doctor, so probably psychiatrist. Anyway, but he writes for City Journal pretty regularly, and he's been writing for a long time. Anyway, but so he has a huge study of underclass mentality. and one of the characteristics of the underclass mentality is that thing that you just said, where I'm gonna have to I'm losing the thread of it, but it's the idea that like these things just randomly happen to you, that you're a victim of your circumstances kind of thing. And that is anyway. So it's funny to me that in our culture we're sinking into the underclass mentality because we're so rich. It's weird. It is. Oh, that's what it was. I'm sorry. People in that ecosystem, that underclass culture, and this is as Thomas Sowell writes about. This is a pan-racist culture. This is just what underclass people do, regardless of what they look like. It's create drama. Rather than actually, having the moral fortitude to look at the actual things that they do that are bad and change them and do the moral work, that's very difficult. Instead, what they do is manufacture problems, petty, stupid social problems, and they focus on those petty, stupid social problems, rather than anything that's actually productive.
Right.
So we're all in the underclass now.
Yeah. Well, right, exactly, and it's almost like you can't disprove what they're saying. Because a lot of this is coming from this whole notion of the postmodern ethos, which says that your feelings, your emotions are above everything. So my lived experience is really what is reality. So it doesn't matter that the overwhelming evidence shows that that white cops don't shoot unarmed black men just out of pure racism. There's just no evidence to support that. Doesn't matter.
That it's a trend.
Right, exactly. Doesn't matter. And God
Who cares
bless
about your facts? It contradicts my narrative. I feel that this happens, therefore it does.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and that's the thing, and I think that's a result of just the access we have to immediate information. Where somebody films something on a cell phone and it goes on YouTube, like the shooting in New Zealand. People Facebook living a massacre,
which I don't understand. Holy cow! Run and get your gun and shoot the bad guy, or call the. You know what I mean? Hold out your phone. Are you crazy? Anyway.
Okay, yeah. But I think some people were. I think the shooters were doing it though. That's what I heard.
Okay. I thought you meant bystanders.
Yeah, no. The shooters.
Massacre? Are you kidding me?
No, the shooters.
Get a stick.
Right.
Hit them with a chair.
Right. Something. Do something. I think the shooters planned this so they could put it on Facebook Live. It's just disgusting. But the thing of it is, that's as horrific as that is. 49 people killed. That's an incredible massacre. It just staggers the mind. But statistically, that sort of thing is anomalous, right? And so for us to say, okay, since that happened, we've got to find every weapon on this small island, New Zealand, gather it up and take it out in the middle of the Pacific and drop it in the middle. That kind of reactive. That we see that in our country. Where we have school shootings, but we see these children on television crying. We have unarmed black men shot by racist cops. That happens, but it's on YouTube, so we see it.
Right, but we don't see the 300 times a cop, was scared, but he assessed the situation carefully, and he decided that he wasn't going to pull his gun, or whatever it was, because that's not filmable, or it just didn't happen to hit the news cycle or whatever. Right. So our perception is completely warped by the episodic or the random happenstance of, or often the politically chosen amalgamation of what seem to be statistics, but are really just anecdotes.
Right. Well, so based on that, so you see this horrible thing happen, and you go, okay, we've got to change that's the emotional reaction.
That's not my emotional reaction at all. My emotional reaction is like to cry, right? People died. Yeah. They have families,
Well, but then okay, so that's your emotional reaction. But then you have the emotional reaction of those who say this whole thing's got to come down because of this thing, because of this very thing right here. Mike Brown or Trayvon Martin or who pick it.
I know that people do that, but it doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah. Because maybe that's just because I believe really firmly in individual responsibility. The people involved with Mike Brown are the people responsible for Mike Brown. I'm not responsible. I didn't have anything to do with that. I don't live in his state even. I don't pay taxes. That's not my belief system. There's no way I could possibly affect that. Right. Anyway, so it's kind of incoherent to me to jump to that kind of conclusion. I know that people do it, but it doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, and again, it comes down to this unprovable fact that so for instance, virtually every time I get into this discussion with my friends who think that big sweeping systemic changes are necessary, I go, okay, there's systemic racism. What do we need to change? What law? Name it. Name a law. Well, the response is, you just don't understand. And that just shows your ignorance. You just don't get what's going on. And I'm going, ooh.
I just told you to give me, like an agenda. And they don't.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So so I can't disprove that. Okay. So there's this, it's kind of like, somebody who would say, yes, God exists because I say he exists. No, let me demonstrate the historicity of the resurrection. Let me demonstrate, the philosophical.
So they're just taking it on faith.
It is.
Because they really, but more. I mean, that kind of faith is feelings.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, and it's not
faith,
a
faith. Actual faith is built on reason. It's combined with reason. The two work together.
Yeah.
So if you don't have faith plus reason, then you basically have emotion.
Yeah, and you have what we might call in our contemporary, what a new atheist might call faith, where you believe in something with no evidence.
Yeah, blind faith.
Yeah,
as opposed to appropriate, reasonable, justifiable faith.
Right. Yeah, Kant's leap in the dark type of thing.
Yeah.
And so, and that, I'm careful to put it that way. I don't want to make folks who struggle with this, I don't want to be pejorative toward them. Because again, I mean, I feel the same emotion when I see, these videos of black men being shot when they're unarmed, or I read the stories about it and these sorts of things, or hear about children shooting each other in Chicago, or look at the statistics and look, how come all these black men are in prison in greater proportion to white men? That, that evokes an emotional response as well. But I just, the disconnect comes for me when, there's this systemic racism God out there that I can't, I'm like, okay, there's systemic racism. What do we change? Let's change it. Let's fix it but there's no, it's just, you don't get it. You don't understand what's going on. And I'm kind of like, okay, something else is afoot here. I do think
there is an element of truth to that, in that I believe that the world is inherently corrupt, because I'm a Christian, right? Sin is real. Racism is a sin, and that's, so it's part of the corruption of the world, and we're never going to get rid of it. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try, that doesn't mean we shouldn't repent, when we do the wrong thing. It does, but I mean, we're never going to eradicate evil, because as Solzhenitsyn says, it's bound up, the dividing line between good and evil runs through every human heart. It's in us, So the only way of getting rid of evil is, to kill ourselves, but that's also wrong. That only perpetuates evil. Okay, so ultimately the only thing that's going to solve racism, is redemption, eternal redemption, the future that we all have where all people of all tribes and tongues, come together, under the God who made us all and loves us all so much that he sent his son for us. So I think part of so if you say, the world is systematically broken and corrupt, yeah, I'm with you. But then when you jump onto therefore we can fix it ourselves, I'm off the boat.
Yeah.
We can't.
Right.
So again, we should try to have as just a society as we can, but we have to be humble about what we really are able to achieve, given how broken we are.
Right. Well, and that's where I'm just, where I say, okay, let's talk about solutions. We can do this with this set of individuals. We can, whatever, offer more job training or whatever you want to talk about. And then the retort comes, no, it's broader than that. It's the systemic thing that, this country was founded on a racist system.
So what, eliminate this country?
That's my question.
Okay, do you really think that the world would be better without the United States? Where is it better? And is there anywhere else that is more less racist than the United States? No.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably pockets in certain cities here and there, or whatever, certain communities, but there's nowhere better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
so if you want, anyway, there's just no perfection available. So you might as well pick the best we got and try to make, every little place incrementally better. I think that's the best we can really hope for.
Yeah. Right. And it's, and that's where I think that it is. It's the hard work of convincing individual hearts and minds. But I don't know. See, that's where I'm kind of adrift in all this, because, the sea I swim in is out there, and we're all, we're friendly, we're buddy. I don't see these big divides, in our nation. But then I flip on the social media, I flip on the YouTube, I flip on Ben Shapiro, I flip on,
Well, controversy also gets eyeballs.
Right.
So they have to talk about the hot button stuff, and they have to manufacture or blow stuff up. That's just part of the media business, and I'm part of that. We do that. And you know what people are going to click on, because it's like something crazy.
Yeah.
If it's crazy, people are going to click on it, right?
Yeah.
But like the crazy thing, you know, maybe affecting, you know, 0.00001%, you know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they are systemic or they're much larger, you know, problems. But often the kind of clickbait conversation, you know, again, that's what gets the most attention, even though it's not the most reflective of reality.
Yeah. Well, but the problem with it is it seems like these conversations come to such a fever pitch that then you get politicians putting legislation in place where it's literally legal to let a baby die on a table.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so now this whole thing that's maybe it's up here in the the clickbait media area. This has crossed over into real life.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And so, and so I see that. I definitely see that in the abortion thing. it is tragic what is going on right now with the sexual revolution. I mean, it just blows my mind.
I was going to say that about, like, I just read some things that screenshots from parents of transgender children talking about how, for example, their daughters, this is a daughter who's appearing as a son, has been binding her chest to hide her breasts. And because of that, her lungs were compressed and she could not breathe. They went to the doctor and the doctor said, this is crazy, your breasts are a normal part of your body, you're a female, take that off, you're hurting yourself. The doctor said, well, make sure that, when you take it off a couple of times and get breath throughout the day and then continue wearing normally. And then gave them like a thing to inflate the lungs artificially. You're like, your lungs would inflate normally if you just weren't like squeezing your natural body parts in unnatural ways. Anyway, so that kind of thing, yeah, that's like the infanticide stuff. Crazy. We're mutilating children,
Yeah, right. And it blows my mind.
This is not only legal, but like that's the thing that that the preeminent medical societies are recommending.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Right. It's a situation where you hear some liberals who are at least honest and try to come in good faith. And so I talk about Sam Harris a lot on my podcast because Sam Harris, I would if you can hook me up with Sam Harris, let me know. Because I'd love to debate Sam Harris sometime because I think I could get him. Anyway, but he talks, but and rightly so. He very much and he's gotten a lot of flack for this, for speaking out against Islam. And
that's common among the kind of like atheist types because they're so rational and they don't understand the faith aspect of Islam. Faith to them doesn't make any sense. And, so the sorts of things that people do in the name of faith are just automatically all placed in crazy basket for them. So I think it's easier for them, more intellectually consistent for them to do that sort of thing.
Right. But so he'll talk about, he tells the story about this intellectually got into it with about, female genital mutilation. And so he will argue for that and then in the same breath say, we should support transgender rights, and I don't know how far Sam Harris personally is willing to take this.
Well, if he's against mutilating little children, if you're a Muslim, I assume he's against mutilating little children. I don't know, for the sexual revolution. I don't know. It would seem likely that he would support adults doing that, but I don't know.
I would think so. Well,
that would be consistent anyway, but people are not always consistent.
No, Sam Harris is wildly inconsistent in my opinion. That's why I think it would be fun to speak with him. But anyway, that's the thing that probably I regret more than anything about my little soiree with liberalism and mainline denominations is I had several gay and lesbian friends. I didn't have any transgender friends there. That really wasn't in vogue back in the mid 2000s. But I had a lot of gay and lesbian friends who were miserable doesn't even begin to describe. The lesbian friends I had, now this is anecdotal obviously, but there has been some research done on this as well, so you can go find this too. But emotionally the girls were it was bad day at Slippery Rock for them most of the time. It was not, they were just not having a good go of it emotionally. The men had some emotional problems, but most of the time they had physical problems for obvious reasons. Because when you engage in that kind of activity, then you get sick. And so that I just chose to turn a blind eye to that, to say that, well, these people love each other and they have a right to love each other the way they love each other. And it never occurred to me to say, hey, you know what? I love you, and this is not good for you. That's the thing. I think. Well, I don't want to say sometimes. I think a lot of times we Christians miss is when we say, hey, the Bible says that is an abomination to God, right? We can pound on the pulpit and say, homosexuality is an abomination to God. But what we hardly ever say, or this is my observation, what we hardly ever say is the reason God says that's an abomination to him is because you're hurting yourself doing that. And God loves you, and he's going to tell you the things that are going to be good for you, not the things that are going to be harmful to you. And so the reason, and this is one thing that drives me nuts about Ben Shapiro, and his friend, and I appreciate that he has a friendship with Dave Rubin, who's gay, and that sort of thing. But Shapiro puts, he says, yes, homosexuality is a sin, and I wouldn't attend a gay wedding, and I wouldn't bake a gay wedding cake for Dave, and all this other stuff. Kind of pontificates on this.
Bake a cake for Dave.
And so, so he kind of goes on this, this idea, but he kind of puts homosexuality in this realm of religious taboo, and it's not religious taboo. There is a reason why God forbids certain activities in Scripture. I mean,
well, God has reasons for forbidding everything that he forbids, right?
Yeah.
Murder is bad.
Yeah.
Adultery, bad.
Yeah.
It's not just happening between two people in the privacy of their bedroom there either. Right. Everything God loves us, and that's why he tells us to do things that are good for us and not do things that are bad for us. Yeah. Right.
Precisely. And so, that's the argument that. And again, not that we're gonna have any luck convincing anybody, because it just, a lot of this stuff seems so far gone now. But that's the thing that seems to be. Those are the two things that seem to be bleeding over into the culture is, and I don't know how widespread this is, but you hear
it's really hard for me to gauge on that topic, because I feel like a lot of the things that are said about religious people in relation to LGBT issues are caricatures. Yeah. It's kind of like, have you ever talked to like an actual normal Christian, not the Westboro Baptist Church, which I don't even know if they're Christians. Yeah. You know what I mean? No. I mean, I feel like, all religious people are cast as these evil, tyrannical people who are preaching fire, and then like that. I mean, I've been in all kinds of churches, and that has not been my experience at all.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, I wonder how much of that is a constructed barrier against, because if you can admit then that Christians are not crazy bigots, then you actually have to consider their ideas. And if you don't want to consider their ideas because you like the things that you're doing that contradict them, so it's easier to just say, well, they're a bunch of bigots, because that prevents you from having basically an existential crisis.
Yeah. Well, and this is just me. This is just my lived experience. But I'll tell you why I walked away from faith when I did, is because I didn't want a God telling me what to do.
Yeah.
That's it. That was the bottom line.
I don't like that myself many times. Right? How many of us actually, I mean, I'll typically, often in retrospect, I say, thank you, God, for teaching me not to have premarital sex, because I know lots of people who do that, and it sucks.
Yeah.
Did I feel that way when I wanted to have premarital sex? No, I did not. Mm-hmm. I, said, God, you hate me. You're so mean. I'm being deprived of so much fun right now. Right.
Right.
And there's that's just one example. There's so many things like that where I mean, I don't know that it's quite a religious injunction not to do drugs, but people who do drugs, or I mean, it is a religious don't get drunk, right? So okay, that's why I haven't. Then you learn, meet people who are addicts, and you're like, whoa. So glad I was saved that little trip on this suck train.
Yeah.
Because because God, I've just said, okay, well, I don't really know why, but whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so you're right, but if you don't have that faith first as the basis, it's really hard to just, use it to protect yourself from crazy things.
Right. Well, and that's the thing I sense from Sam Harris the most, honestly. And the thing I would challenge him on it is just, Sam, I think you're afraid to have a God tell you what to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's like the original sin, right?
Yeah, that's right. Did God really say? Exactly. All together now. Right, and that's the thing that I talk to my children about is, when we start talking about, especially Amelia, start talking about boyfriends and da 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 da. It's like, I can't. So I try to get that. I wear my emotions on my face, which is helpful as a parent sometimes.
Oh, yes, it is. I can control my kids with a very evil look.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to launch across the table at them.
Right, exactly. I don't have to beat you
save
now.
both that humiliation.
Right. And when you look like me, I got this tough trick. Yeah. But so when I was a teenager, that was the cool thing to do, was for us to behave that way, because none of us were Christians.
Yeah.
And that was growing up in the 80s, coming out of the 70s, especially, that thing was hitting middle America in Oklahoma when I was growing up.
And if
so
you
that
don't have that, you have nothing. No one's telling you anything. You're just like lost in a sea of chaos.
Right.
It's horrible.
Right. And, and that's what I try to tell the kids. I'm like, Amelia, I cannot tell you those things that I did when I was that age are I still have nightmares about those things.
Yeah.
I still regret those things. Those things have damaged me. They've damaged the person I did them with.
Yeah.
And, those are things that our culture and society consider completely innocent. Oh, the kids are just being kids, and that boys will be
it's
boys.
A lie. Run away.
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously, run.
Well, and that's the thing that drives me crazy with the boys, is we talk about boys like, oh, the boys can go out and do, have all the sex.
Oh, that drives me nuts. I hate that. It's so unfair. Yeah. It makes me so mad.
Right.
The double standard is definitely there.
And it's just, there's no data that supports this. It's completely false. And I mean, again, my lived experience, but the research backs this up, is that men get emotionally attached as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're humans, right? As far as I can tell.
Yeah. So it's insane. So education. Then we start talking about that.
Never send your kids to sex ed. That's, I think, the conclusion of this.
Right. Yeah. Don't do that. So the idea is don't engage. Abstinence. That's it. Takes care of it. That's a foolproof way to make sure.
I've had people actually ask me, well, how will you know what to do? And I'm like, oh, you don't need any instruction. It's not that complicated.
It really isn't. No, not at all. Not at all. So the abortion thing, the sexual revolution, education, I think, is another place that I'm worried about, where this all this nonsense is crossing over. And before we got on air, I mentioned Peter Collier. You got to check that guy out, because he's a 1960s hippie.
If you send me the link,
I will. Yeah, you got to listen. But the tidbit he mentioned, he just talks about how he was part of the 1960s hippie culture, where they were trying to bring about the revolution, and he ended up getting involved. He and his buddy Dave Horowitz. I don't know if you.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So they're buddies. The two of them were working with the Black Panthers in San Francisco, and Dave Horowitz hired a friend of his to do the books for a school thing the Black Panthers were trying to do. And when in the midst of her doing the books, she found out the Panthers were involved in drugs and other illicit things, and they killed her.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. They killed her because she found out about that, and that's when Dave and I talked to.
You never become a bookie for a bunch of commies.
Right. So Peter Collier and Dave Hort, obviously this is when they're like, okay, this is crazy. We're out of here. And then on top of that, after we pulled out of Vietnam, just the horrors that went on, in Vietnam and Cambodia, the killing fields, all this. I mean, when we pulled out of Vietnam, then how the communist government that ran all the bourgeois out of the cities and had them killed. It was just the
disillusioning.
Obviously
democratic socialism isn't so democratic after all. And,
So they went the other way. But one thing that Collier mentioned in his talk that I heard was Bill Ayers, of Weather Underground fame. His MO was, we've got to get the colleges. That was their aim. If we get, the 60s, let's get the colleges, let's get these children on board, let's we can start the revolution there, and then once we get the colleges, then we need to move on to K through 12. That was
they're doing that.
Yeah. So one of your interviews that sticks out to me is the one where, and you had an article in the Federalist about this, where the woman, I think it was a woman, was trying to institute something to do with mathematics that was so.
I'm trying to remember how it was, because it's one of those. I don't know if it was feministing math or queering math. Like, all of these things are happening, right now in higher like they both of these need double quote marks around them, right? Higher education. So this is a lady that is paid money by Illinois and federal taxpayers, because almost all colleges are federally subsidized through student loans and typically grants and all kinds of other things. So me and you and everybody is paying this lady to, basically her goal is to undo white supremacy using math education. And the way that they do that basically is by not teaching math, but instead teaching political propaganda, in math class. So, there have been literally journal articles by people in this sphere saying things like, they use fancier words, but they mean truth and objectivity and finding the right answer all have to be destroyed. Those are male concepts. Right. I literally read a paper that was talking about this, female concepts and also, anyway, it's so offensive to me, this is an aside, that we're going to identify with femaleness, confusion and chaos and non-rationality. I don't think women are confusing. Women are confusing, but the point is, the highest ideals of womanhood are not summarized by craziness. And that's basically what they're saying there, right? It's feminist, to take away objectivity from math and science. No, it's not. Yeah. Women think too, thanks.
Yeah.
But this actually is a project that has been going on for a really long time. If you look at the polls of faculty on campuses, the people in the education and the social scientists are basically, for the ideological distribution runs from democratic socialist to communist. There's not any conservative people. There's not even any libertarians, So these are the people who are teaching teachers, and those teachers, of course, teach our kids. And the people at the top are doing destroying objectivity and truth and actual scholarship, right? How can you actually do anything that you can call math or science scholarship if you can't believe in objectable, provable truth, like an existence that is verifiable? That's the opposite of math, Anyway, but so not only is it just destroying the whole academic discipline, but it's also, destroying, kids' ability to know anything. Right. And so we're using public tax dollars to indoctrinate kids to be ignorant shock troops for political progressivism.
Right. Well, then that's what it's going to. What do you think the end game is? Because here's what I see. Talk about a tweet I might put out later or something on Facebook. One thing that I often hear and I'm just going to say it this way, my social justice warrior friends say.
Where do you get these people?
Oh, I try to make friends with my enemies. I really do.
Okay.
So the thing of it is I want to hear what the other side has to say. I want to know all the arguments, because hey, that's the thing is I have come by where I am at this point in my life quite honestly.
Yeah.
Because I've tried everything else, right? In earnest, and so I don't want to miss anything, and so I try to make friends with as many people that oppose my views as humanly possible and have conversations with them. But so here's the thing: is the problem with the whole discussion going on, and I wrote about this, was get on Twitter, somebody makes a statement about racism, and somebody says that's Marxist. And then the other person
Oh,
says, "That's
yeah.
right." Remember
I
this?
thought that was a great,
No, Vody
kind of
is
thing in your piece
yeah.
about that. Yeah.
Well, and I stole that from Vody Bacham.
Yeah, that was great.
But he's spot on.
Yeah,
Make
he's
a statement
spot
about racism. Oh, you're a Marxist.
And then
you're
we're
racist.
just like arguing with bumper stickers. So
Exactly.
Bumper stickers the whole way down. Yeah.
Right, but here's the thought I had as I was thinking through this, and I actually was listening to another Hillsdale lecture on this on Leninism. And so I'm starting to sort out all these categories, like what's a Leninist? Well, and what's the difference between a Leninist and a straight Marxist, right? Who knows?
All are bad.
Right, all are bad. Agreed, all are bad.
Do not follow.
Right. So Marx theorized that eventually history would put the hands of power in the proletariat. They would own the means of production, and this would just naturally kind of happen
I
throughout.
thought they had to have a revolution. That's not very natural.
Marx was more on this side of, so from what I understand, again, I could have
rise up against the oppressors. That doesn't sound peaceful.
Well, but this would happen. This would happen more organically. It wouldn't happen with what we usually.
The revolution wouldn't be fomented by secret powerful people. It would just naturally occur to the proletariat that they should mass murder others.
They would get right. They would it still is violent.
Got to work on that theory a little bit.
So it's still is violent, but Lenin was really of the opinion that the movement needs a strong leader. We've got to take so what Lenin recognized was what you want to look for is a failed state. You want to look for a situation where the state has crumbled to the point where it's completely failed, and you can fill that power vacuum.
Interesting. And
so the tweet I might put out to my social justice warrior friends is, oh, you all's agenda isn't Marxist, it's Leninist. Because what you're because the attempt is, and this is where the postmodern thing comes in, is the postmodern ethos with all this is to weaken the system to the point where
chaos.
Right, where the state fails.
And then people seek a strong leader.
Power vacuum.
They're desperate and it's terrible.
That's Leninism.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
So
immunizing the eschaton a little bit there.
Right. So yes, who knows? I mean, it might work. I mean, think about what is
very common sort of procedure, whether it's natural or artificial.
Yeah.
But it's very common think about Muslim theocracies, right? I mean, you either have tribal warlords and all the poor little people caught in the middle while, crazy ideologues, murder, rampage around the countryside. Or you have, a terrible person like Bashar Assad, a dictator, but at least rando tribal people aren't running over and raping your wife and daughters constantly,
Yeah. Well, right.
Oh my gosh. What a choice.
Yeah. Which poison do you want to pick?
This is a great time to say United States of America, not the worst place in the world.
Well,
maybe we shouldn't destabilize it.
Yeah. Well, so that's another, this is on an aside, but why are Democrats opposed to building a wall? If America is such a terrible place, we should build the walls, all the way to space so nobody
don't
can
come in because it's so terrible.
It's terrible.
You don't want to be here, right?
It's awful. But so my point to the education
thing.
You
don't understand how bad it is here. We have systemic racism. And everyone else in the world is like, you guys are crazy. It is way better there than it is here. Yeah.
Joy, you're triggering some of my friends. Stop it.
I didn't even know you had any friends.
You cut me deep. You cut me. So anyway, the education thing. So again, the three areas: abortion, the sexual revolution, the education. All three of those pieces I see bleeding over from whatever the media is concocting, and the clickbait and the fake news and all this stuff. When on the ground, kind of going, I'm not sure, but those things are bleeding over to. Again, I think it's a Leninist thing where they can destabilize things to the point where the state fails.
Well,
I don't know.
Whether that is meant or not, that is what is happening. I think the general sense in America is, even though we're having a great economy right now, people are really happy about that. But money isn't everything, obviously, and we all have, friends who are addicts of something or another. We all have friends who, whose marriages are a mess and didn't necessarily need to get that way. We have, friends who, or family, or we know people who are, in their mom's basement playing video games and they don't really have any purpose in life. There's a lot. I mean, we all know about the problems, in inner cities in Appalachia. There's serious problems in this country. We have a lot of loneliness, a lot of sorrow, a lot of, and we have more money than any society ever in world history, right? Money is not what we need. Yeah. Anyway, so I think, I know that Americans are worried, despite the prosperity that we have, and I think there's legitimacy to that.
Yeah. Well, and
I don't think we're about to collapse right now, and create, and we're going to have the arisal of some strong. I don't think that's near future sort of thing, but we are. If you've read any of Charles Murray's work, coming apart. We are coming apart. The evidence for that is really unarguable. Yeah. So the real only question is there any hope of turning it around or stabilizing? Right. And I think, trying to do that is what everyone who's a red-blooded citizen ought to be trying, working on. Right. Well, and that's what I'm wondering is, so the Weinstein brothers, Eric, Green, Evergreen State fame. I think it wasn't Brett, but it was his brother Eric, talk about how this whole thing is a lot more fragile than we think it is. Oh, but all good things always are, right? Like even just a marriage, right? Yeah. That's a precious thing and ought to be guarded if you have a good one. Anyway, something that you've put your whole entire life into sometimes can be just destroyed by seeing an old flame on Facebook. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think that's spot on. And so the notion of this being, while it's a great place, it's not as stable as we might think, and it may not be as resilient as we think it is. And I think America's, holy crap, look at all we've come through, right? There's a lot, well, what is, I forget the person who said, but there's a lot of ruin in the country. Yeah. Right? It doesn't, it's, my sense is that, it has, decline isn't, it's not just going to be like pop and then, oh, bam, we've got a dictator. That's not going to happen. But if you think about how Rome declined, right? Mm-hmm. It took hundreds of years. Yeah. Right. That may be more of what happens in our situation. More the British Empire. Yeah. Hundreds of years. Right. Sorry. No, that's fine. But then at the same time, I'm thinking about Russia. Of course, they came from I think the worst form of, if you have a revolution against a dictatorship or some sort of feudalism, I think the changes can come a lot more fast and furious than when you come from a system that has provided the most prosperity and anything else you could possibly imagine in human history. That it's going to decline slowly. So it should be interesting to see. But I think the plans are in place. I don't tend to believe in that sort of thing. I think happenstance is a bigger mover of history, than people can have all kinds of plans, but God's really in charge. True enough. I don't believe in evil financiers or whatever. I don't know what you're alluding to. No, well, no, I don't think there's an Illuminati. I don't even think like the establishment gets together in smoke-filled rooms and does dastardly things. Well, they're just as bumbling and stupid as the rest of us. They just have a lot more power and money. Right. So they can project, an illusion. Yeah. Well, no, I think, again, when I say the plans are in place, I think the three-pronged attack we're seeing that's really on the ground real is abortion, the sexual revolution, education. Oh, okay. There definitely are, trends that if they continue, they destroy people, right? Yeah. But there's lots of ways to destroy something. Yeah. Right? If you just think of it in terms of a person. Like the ancient philosophers like to compare, a city to a person, right? Or to a family. And, so there's a lot of ways that a person could be destroyed, right? He can be destroyed by, profligacy and sex and eating too much, or drinking himself into oblivion. Anyway, by becoming a murderer and a thief, and people, there's a lot of ways that a civilization can destroy itself. So, but we have the benefit of having history as our guide, so we can see, when A, then B. A is present.
Yeah.
B's probably coming.
Yeah. Well, and yes, and again, the answer to this seems to be coming forth of we need to talk through this, we need to reason, but the big impasse I see right now is you've got people who want to use reason and argumentation and fact, and then you've got people who are saying, I don't care about any of that. What I care about is, and so what's how do you get past that impasse? And what I'm observing is that Western civilization, as we know it, is living off the again, Nietzsche said, God is dead and the streets will run with his blood, right? I'm just wondering if, in a sense, he was right, and in the vein of that's how Americans consider, probably the more Americans than we care to realize consider God dead, and we're just living off of his dead carcass, and eventually there will be no more carcass to live off of, and that'll be that.
I do think that we are. I mean, I have been starting to draw a parallel between our economic bankruptcy and our cultural bankruptcy. Because everybody who has been paying any attention knows that our nation has trillions in unfunded liabilities that are basically impossible to ever pay. We don't have the money. We spent all the money. We spent all the money for decades, so that is a fact. And but I think that we are also doing the same thing culturally. We're purchasing today at the expense of the future. And we're doing that every single time, people choose to just say not have any children today, at the expense of the future. I'm not going to contribute to the future. I'm going to enjoy myself today. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, and right. That's just, but we do that in all kinds of ways, and so I've been kind of mulling that over lately because it seems to be something that we do.
Well, so if you could wave your magic wand and fix it all, what do you think? I'm going to give you my opinion on this as well. What do you think would be the one thing that the average American needs? That what could we fix in this country?
Well, I actually have through writing my Common Core book and getting really close to the halls of power and finding them all corrupt, I basically came to the conclusion that you and I, but basically all of us, citizens, patriots, we are not going to fix the problem at a macro level. We can only fix it at a micro level. So my philosophy of change is from the inside out, not the outside in. So I also think there's a biblical parallel with that, where the Bible talks about how, if you have a leader in your church, he has to have his home in order. Yep. So, and I've also been, convicted. I've seen people who wanted to claim power in leadership positions really not having a well-run home, and then they take their inability to manage 3 or 4 people, in their family, and then they can't manage 20 or 50 people. Big surprise, right? So, the feeling upward thing is something that I don't want to do. As I want to have integrity with that. So I really think that we are not going to fix, for example, our Social Security bankruptcy. Not going to happen. We're not going to fix the inner cities. We're not going to fix the public schools. I really think that the only way that we can maybe possibly at the end of our lifetimes get to affecting lots of people is by having integrity, slowly and vertically, growing, throughout our lives. So in other words, I really think that if the first thing that we need to be doing is making sure that we ourselves are ordered, and that starts with, being a church attender. Not only church attender, but someone who is avidly trying, because that changes your character, right? And if you're not, the inner transformation is the first thing that has to happen. That's, where you get, literally the lifeblood.
Right.
Your IV, transfusion starts there. And then, being faithful in our vocations as mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, children, brothers and sisters, right there. I mean, and that personally, I can hardly do more than that right now as it is. There, and I think, I think that family and community is a leadership school, and that it's the way that you actually gain, because our world is corrupt, our government is corrupt, our society is corrupt, and I don't want to be corrupt. So if I want to have integrity and be on, podcasts or TV or whatever, I don't want people to come into my home and see me shouting at my children, or I don't know, watching a movie on my phone while my kids, are, need to have a meal or whatever, or whatever that should not be happening, right? I have no credibility to be talking to anybody about anything if I can't keep my poop in a group. Anyway, so that's, I mean, that's really, what I think. And I think if and when people are, once you get to that stage, which I'm still working on, I think it's important to say, look, what is the problem that I have a real heart for? And then how can I personally solve that? So, I mean, in other points in my life, I've done that by, I've been a tutor for, kids who don't have families. I mean, there's Big Sisters, Big Brothers programs. If you have the time, and if you have, your affairs generally in order, reach out, to people who have a need, but do it in your local community. Do it through your church. Is there a single mom in your church? Does she need a male figure to regularly play basketball with her son, or have him over, take him to, ball games or whatever? Do that, and then commit to being there for that child until he's a grown-up, that's the only answer that I've come up with.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say. And I'll give you my lived experience again.
Okay.
Because I have this complex that I've always had this, I want to save the world. That's why I became.
I have it too. So what I just said to you is what I have to preach to myself all the time.
Go. Okay, so we're simpatico here.
But I think, I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, I think I would be one of these corrupt people if God hadn't saved me. We would, wouldn't we all? I have a lust for power too. Yeah. And that's why I went to DC after college, and God sent me away from there. But being able to do that gave me an insight to the way that those people live, and I discovered how corrupt they are. Yeah. And personally, same thing with the Common Core reporting. These people, they have credentials, they're on this education board, that they don't know nothing. Their ideas are literally mutilating child's minds. Yeah. And so they're sitting up there pretending that they're like the grand poobah of education, and they're corrupt. It's sickening, I do not want to be that person. Yeah. So you see that and you say, these people are damaging children. I am not going to do that, Yeah. So if you're committed to anti-corruption, well, that's a pretty difficult thing, right? I have to have integrity. So the only way I know to have integrity is to be faithful in the little things. Yep.
Yeah. Right. Well, and and you've mentioned it several times. And I kind of went at this backward, but ultimately you need to be converted to Christ. You do.
Yes.
Okay. So sorry. I mean, again.
Not sorry.
All right. Yeah. All my SJW. I mean. That's the thing I struggle with them the most on is, look, you guys are trying to save the world. Stop trying to save the world.
Jesus did that. You're not Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. And and so that was the thing, is that's why that is the whole reason why I became an evangelical pastor, because I thought, this is how I can save the world. Yeah. I'll go around and preach the gospel.
That's why I did the same thing. That's why I wanted to go to DC. Got to save the world.
Going to save the world. And then I realized, the office of Savior is already occupied.
Way better
than I could ever do it. Yeah. And that was devastating. So I thought, okay, well, if I can't save the world that way, then I'm going to go, maybe I could save the world this. That's why I went liberal. I thought, well, I could save the world this way. And then, and then I found out, okay, I can't save the world. I give up.
It sucks. I know.
I can't say. Well, and not only it sucks,
Can't
but
even save myself.
right, exactly. Not only it sucks, but I suck, and so.
Boy, that's embarrassing.
Right, it is. It's but
Yeah.
and again, I've kind of come by where I am at this point, pretty honestly. But I, in a sense, I so wish I had. I wish I could have, figured. Okay, that really is stupid, but I just wasn't wise enough. I just had to figure it out. I just had to go through it, and so once I came out, I thought, okay, I'm gonna stop trying to save the world, and that's when I felt like the Holy Spirit started to bring me back to faith.
Because it's humility. You
Right.
can't learn anything if you can't be humble.
Right. So I said, okay, I can't say. I got to stop trying to. I got to get out of that mindset. I'm gonna start trying to be a good husband and father, and so.
And that's actually really hard. I mean, I don't have any experience with a husband and father, but it is really hard to be a good wife and mom.
Right.
But the thing is, I mean, I can't speak for you, but like if I submit to that rather than fighting it and saying, oh, I don't want to be here with these sloppy kids or whatever, and you say, wow, obviously I don't have the character to lead anybody. I can't even lead a small child.
Right.
Well, how do you think you're going to have the character to lead other people, right? You can't even, get up for a baby without grumbling. Please, lady,
Right.
So I mean, but I think family is designed as that training ground, and so many of us are rejecting the very thing that would make us the person we want to be.
Right. And that's precisely right. And so, but then what was interesting about that is once that started to happen, then that's when all the the old sin and all my mistakes started. Like, oh, I've wasted all this time, and all I had to do, and so. That's when I really was, came back to faith because I was like, okay, I need my sins forgiven. Not only have I wasted, it's there's this one comedian who says he does this whole stand-up routine about how he's 40 now and it's halftime and he played a sloppy first half. Well, that's me, right? so anyway, I needed
Jesus pays all the
right,
laborers the same amount.
I know, that's right. And so I I realized I needed the forgiveness of sins, and so people need to be converted, and that's one thing that drives me nuts.
That's what will save the world.
Well, that's right.
Has saved the world.
Right. That's right. Yeah. That's right. And so my whole goal in life right now is for my children to graduate from high school and go to college if they want to, and keep their faith and raise children who keep their faith. Yeah. If that happens, win.
I know.
Yeah. That's
nothing else matters,
right.
honestly.
And that's what drives me nuts about a guy like Jordan Peterson, right? Is he's like, clean up your room, clean up your damn room. I love that. Okay, so because I get what he's saying about that, I just wish he would translate that more to, hey, look at just like what you were saying. If you can't get up in the middle of the night and take care of your child,
you can't pick up your underwear. Seriously?
Right, exactly.
You can't even take care of a baby man.
Right. Yeah, and so...
Well, maybe that's why he's doing it, right? If you can't pick up your underwear, you can't do anything else.
Right, exactly. And you're going to go out and solve the world's problems on racism? Please, give me a break.
Right.
So, I mean...
You can't even, cook yourself a meal.
Yeah. Right, precisely.
You're going to solve racism? Like a problem that's been here since, the sin happened?
Right. Right, exactly.
Get some perspective.
Yeah. Well, and I think Peterson, generally speaking, he's kind of and I get good and both on bad side. If he would stick with this political stuff, I'd pretty much be happy with him. But it's when he gets off into his biblical stuff, it starts that he talks about the Bible all the time, but he psychologizes it.
Yeah, but I think that's actually interesting as far as it goes.
It is interesting as far as it goes, but here's the thing that's ironic about him, paradoxical, ironic is he talks about how. He hates, he's a postmodern Marxist and blah, blah. He goes around, and he's absolutely right about that. I think he's spot on. Except, again, I think they're Leninists. They're not Marxists. But the point is, he rails on about that, and he talks about how, okay, so postmodernism, I wish I could do his voice. He talks like Kermit the Frog or Yoda or something, however he talks. And he goes, okay, so let's give the postmoderns their due, right? Let's give the devil his due, because there is an infinite number of interpretations to any given situation. But there is only...
an infinite number of good interpretations.
Exactly. There is only one or two that won't kill you, okay? Right? So you walk up to a cliff, there is only one interpretation that will keep you alive. Don't jump off the cliff, right? Okay, so, all right. But he takes the Holy Scripture and he says, well, I think it, if we psychologize this, it can mean this. And what I want to ask him is, Dr. Peterson, You say that there is a limited number of interpretations of situation. There is a limited number of interpretations to Holy Scripture, and
that's a good.
you're a little
that's
inconsistent
good.
there, because some of the stuff he does,
that.
right,
Yeah.
right. Some of this, because what I'd really like to know is, Dr. Peterson, do you really think this is what the authors of Holy Scripture intended as the interpretation of it? That would be my huge question to him, because he's done a whole series on Genesis. He's going to do Exodus, blah blah blah, and he's given all these interpretations. And what I'm just dying to ask him. And I've sent him little things, but I never got an answer. Do you really think that's what the author of that portion of Holy Scripture meant to say? Because there's one interpretation, right?
That's a good one.
Anyway, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for asking me.
It's great.
You and your crazy ideas.
I know. Well, we'll see how it goes. I mean,
Would have been
people
worse.
are.
We could have done this riding on a horse.
We could have. We
That
could
would
have.
been awesome.
Oh my gosh, my cousins and everybody are on here. This is great. So right, this is out there already, and we'll put it on YouTube in a couple of days, and then I'll shrink it down to a couple of podcasts. We'll just be all over the place.
Help yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much. Thanks for joining me on this.